Their observation ships hid in the darkness behind Neptune, where no human telescope could find them. For 17 long years, they studied the blue planet and the strange creatures that lived on it. They watched humans fight each other over lines drawn on maps. They watched them argue about money and power and things that seemed so small. They saw a species divided into hundreds of nations, speaking thousands of languages, unable to agree on anything. Ambassador Korveth, the supreme commander of the Velkari extermination fleet, read every report with growing confidence. Humans were weak. Humans were divided. Humans were trapped on a single world with no way to escape into the stars. They would be the easiest conquest in Velkari history. The Dominion had done this many times before. 47 species had fallen to their plasma lances. 47 worlds had been cleansed to make room for Velkari colonies. Earth would be number 40-8, Korveth gave the order on a Tuesday morning. It was an ordinary day on Earth. Children were walking to school. People were drinking coffee and complaining about traffic. Lovers were saying goodbye before work. Nobody looked up at the sky. Nobody knew that death was falling toward them. 12 plasma lances fired from orbit at the same moment. Each one carried enough energy to burn a continent. They struck every major city on Earth simultaneously. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Mumbai, Cairo, Sydney, Moscow, and more. So many more. The strikes lasted 93 seconds when they ended. 4.2 billion human beings were dead. The Velkari expected the survivors to run. They expected panic and chaos and screaming. They expected the remaining humans to turn on each other, fighting over food and water and shelter. That was what always happened. That was what every species did when faced with extinction. But humanity did something the Velkari had never seen before. 6 hours after the strikes, every surviving government on Earth signed a single document. They called it the Unification Compact. Nations that had been enemies for centuries suddenly became allies. Countries that had pointed nuclear weapons at each other that very morning now shared everything they had. Every secret, every resource, every soldier. The president of what remained of the United States stood beside the leaders of Russia and China. Old hatreds meant nothing now. Old borders meant nothing. There was only one thing that mattered anymore. Survival. Dr. Elena Vasquez was a theoretical physicist who had worked at a university in Buenos Aires. On the morning of the first strike, she had been at a conference in Geneva. She was giving a lecture about quantum mechanics when the sky turned to fire half a world away. She did not know it yet, but her husband was dead. Her 7-year-old daughter Sophia was dead. Her parents were dead. Everyone she had ever loved had burned in the same moment. When she finally learned the truth, Elena did not cry. She did not scream. Something inside her went very cold and very quiet. She sat alone in a dark room for 3 days, not eating, not sleeping. And in that darkness, her brilliant mind began to work on a problem. How do you hurt something that lives among the stars? On the 4th day, Elena walked into the emergency bunker where the surviving world leaders had gathered. She was thin and pale, and her eyes were empty of everything except purpose. She carried a folder full of papers covered in equations that no one else in the room could understand. She placed the folder on the table. "I know how to hurt them back," she said. "But I need everyone. Every scientist who survived, every engineer, every factory, everything we have left." General Marcus Stone looked at her. He had lost his wife and 3 children in the Washington strike. His voice was rough when he spoke. "What do you need?" "Time," Elena said. "And resources. All of them." "How long?" 10 years. "Maybe less if we work without stopping." The room was silent. 10 years was a long time. 10 years of hiding. 10 years of building. 10 years of pretending to be dead while the enemy celebrated their victory. And after 10 years, another leader asked. Elaine's empty eyes found the window. Somewhere beyond the sky, the creatures who had murdered her daughter were laughing. They thought humanity was finished. They thought the survivors would simply fade away in the ruins of their world. After 10 years, Elena said quietly, "We make them understand what they have done." The vote was unanimous. That night, humanity began its great disappearing act. Survivors retreated into underground bunkers and tunnel networks that stretched for hundreds of miles. They dismantled everything that could be seen from space. They went dark. They went silent. The Valkyrie watched from their ships and saw a dying world. They saw humans crawling into holes like wounded animals. They reported to the Dominion that Earth would be ready for colonization within a decade. The oceans would make excellent breeding pools once the radiation cleared. They did not understand. They were seeing. Humanity was not hiding. Humanity was not giving up. Down in the darkness beneath the scorched earth, something was being born. Factories worked day and night. Scientists shared ideas across what had once been enemy borders. Engineers solved problems that had seemed impossible just months before. Grief became fuel. Rage became focus. Every human who had survived the first strike carried the same weight in their chest. The weight of the dead. The weight of 4 billion voices crying out for justice. That weight did not crush them. It drove them forward. In a bunker beneath what had once been Switzerland, Elena Vasquez worked 20 hours a day. She barely ate. She rarely slept. But every day her designs grew more refined. Weapons that worked on principles the Valkyrie had never imagined. Ships that could cross the stars faster than anything the Dominion had ever built. And something else. Something she kept in a separate file, locked away from everyone else. A weapon so terrible that she sometimes wondered if she had the right to build it. But then she would close her eyes and hear her daughter's voice. The doubt would fade away. General Stone visited her one night. He found her staring at a holographic display of the enemy's territory. 400 star systems. Billions of Valkyrie? Can we really do this? He asked. Elena did not look away from the display. They killed half our species in 93 seconds. They burned our children alive. And they are up there right now, celebrating. She finally turned to face him. There was something in her eyes now. Something cold and patient and absolutely unbreakable, she said. We can do this. And we will. Above the earth, the Valkyrie continued to watch. They saw nothing but a dying world. They had no idea what was coming. 10 years of silence. The Valkyrie Dominion received regular reports from their observation ships. Earth was quiet. The surviving humans had retreated underground like insects hiding from the sun. Occasionally, the sensors detected heat signatures from deep beneath the surface. Industrial activity, perhaps? But nothing that mattered. A dying species, clinging to life in the ruins of their world, Ambassador Corveth received medals and honors for his great victory. He gave speeches to cheering crowds on the Valkyrie homeworld. He spoke of how icily the humans had fallen, how quickly their civilization had crumbled. He became famous across the Dominion as the commander who had added a 48th world to their empire. The colonization fleet was being prepared. Massive ships filled with Valkyrie settlers would soon travel to Earth. They would drain the oceans into breeding pools. They would tear down the empty human cities and build their own. In a few generations, no one would remember that humans had ever existed. This was how it always went. This was how it had gone 47 times before. But beneath the scorched surface of Earth, humanity was not dying. Humanity was building. The underground city stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. Tunnels connected bunkers that had once belonged to different nations. Russian engineers worked beside American scientists. Chinese factories produced materials designed by European researchers. The old divisions were gone. There was only one nation now, one species, one purpose. General Marcus Stone walked through the construction yards every day. He watched the ships taking shape in massive caverns carved from solid rock. Sleek vessels of war, unlike anything humanity had ever built before. Each one carried weapons that seemed like magic to anyone who did not understand the science behind them. Dr. Elena Vasquez had kept her promise. Her designs had changed everything. Quantum lock missiles could exist in 2 places at once. They could appear inside an enemy ship without passing through its shields. Gravity wells could crush a warship into a ball the size of a marble. Engines that bent space itself could carry a human. It fleed across the galaxy faster than the Valkyrie had ever traveled. And there was the other weapon. The one Alina kept separate from all the rest. The one that made even the hardened survivors of the first strike uncomfortable when they thought about it. Is it necessary? General Stone asked her one night. They stood in her private laboratory, looking at the schematics on her screen. The weapon had no official name. The engineers who helped build it simply called it the ending. They tried to erase us from existence, Alina said. Her voice was calm, but Stone could see the darkness behind her eyes. It had been there for 10 years now. It would never leave. They would have killed every last human being without a moment of doubt. Every child. Every grandmother. Everyone. I know what they did. Then you know why this is necessary? Alina touched the screen, and the weapon's design rotated slowly. I am not building this because I want revenge. I am building it because I want them to understand. I want the entire galaxy to understand. When you try to exterminate humanity, there is only one possible outcome. Stone was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his wife, his children, the house they had lived in, now nothing but ash and memory. How many of them will die? He asked. All of them, Alina said. Eventually, if they do not surrender, if they keep fighting, and if they surrender. Alina finally looked at him. There was something like sadness in her face, buried deep beneath the cold determination. Then they live. I am not a monster, Marcus. I do not want to kill billions of beings, but I will not let them kill us. I will not let them think they can murder half our species and walk away. Stone nodded slowly. He understood. Every human who had survived the first strike understood. There was a price for what the Valkyrie had done, and that price would be paid in full. The years passed. Young humans who had been children during the first strike grew into soldiers and engineers and pilots. They trained in simulators that recreated Valkyrie ships and weapons. They learned every weakness, every blind spot, every flaw in the enemy's technology. They became the most prepared fighting force in the history of any species. Scientists made breakthrough after breakthrough. The pressure of survival pushed human minds to places they had never gone before. Problems that might have taken centuries to solve were cracked in years. The Valkyrie had thought they were killing a primitive species. They had not understood that they were lighting a fire. On the surface, Earth still looked dead. The Valkyrie observation ships reported the same thing year after year. No activity, no signals, no signs of recovery. The humans were finished, but deep underground, 2,000 warships waited in their hidden bases. Each one was crewed by men and women who had lost everything. Each one carried weapons that could break worlds. Each one was ready. On the 10th anniversary of the first strike, Elena Vasquez stood before the assembled commanders of the human fleet. Behind her, a massive screen displayed a single image, the names of the dead, scrolling endlessly. It would take 11 months to show them all. 10 years ago, she said, they murdered our families. They burned our cities. They tried to end our story forever. Her voice echoed through the command center. Every human present remembered exactly where they had been when the sky turned to fire. We have spent a decade in the darkness, preparing for this moment. We have built weapons they cannot imagine. We have trained warriors they cannot defeat. We have become something new. She paused, looking out at the faces before her. So much pain in those eyes. So much loss. But also something else now. Something sharp and bright and hungry. Today, the silence ends. Today, we rise from the ashes of our world. Today, we show the Valkyrie and the entire galaxy what it means to attack humanity. She raised her hand. Launch all ships across the planet. Hidden doors opened in mountains and deserts and frozen wastelands. 2,000 warships rose from the earth like a swarm of angry stars. They climbed through the atmosphere and gathered in orbit, forming into battle groups. The Valkyrie observation ships saw them and sent panicked signals back to the Dominion. But it was too late. The human fleet was already moving. Already jumping toward the first target, the hunters had become the hunted, and humanity was not interested in mercy. Commander. Yellen was drinking a cup of warm nectar when the alarm started screaming. He was stationed at Kithra 7, a small outpost on the edge of Velkari space. Nothing ever happened here. It was a quiet assignment, the kind given to officers who had done nothing wrong, but also nothing special. Yellen had spent 3 years watching. Empty space and filling out reports that no one would ever read. The alarms changed everything. He had 17 seconds to understand what was happening. 17 seconds to look at his screens and see the impossible. Human ships. Dozens of them. Appearing out of nowhere, moving faster than anything he had ever seen. How is this possible? He whispered. They were extinct. The human ships did not slow down. They did not attempt communication. They simply opened fire. Kithra 7 died in 4 minutes. When Ambassador Korveth received the report at Dominion headquarters, he laughed out loud. One outpost meant nothing. The humans had surprised them, yes. But the Dominion controlled 400 star systems and thousands of warships. Let the survivors have their small moment of revenge. They would be crushed soon enough, but the reports kept coming. Kithra 7 was first. Then Velith Prime, a major industrial center. Then the shipyards at Ranus. Then military bases and supply stations and communication hubs across the border regions. The humans appeared without warning, struck with overwhelming force, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. They were not trying to conquer. They were not trying to occupy. They were erasing. Korveth stopped laughing after the first month. After the 3rd month, he stopped sleeping. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. His admirals could not predict where they would strike next. His fleets could not catch them. Every trap he set was avoided. Every ambush was turned back upon itself. How had they done this? How had a primitive species, one he had personally sentenced to death, become something so terrifying? The Galactic Council began to take notice. The Council was a gathering of 200 spacefaring civilizations. They met on a massive station at the center of the galaxy, far from any conflict. They talked and debated and sometimes made decisions that affected billions of lives. They had watched the Velkari conquest of Earth with mild interest. Now, they watched the human counterattack with growing fear. Ambassador Thrin of the Celestine Accord was one of the oldest and wisest members of the Council. His species had lived among the stars for 50,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had seen wars that burned across entire galaxies. But they had never seen anything like this. Thrin traveled personally to meet with the human fleet. He brought offers of mediation, promises of justice, proposals for peace. He was met by Admiral Chenwei aboard the flagship Remembrance. The human ship was strange. Its walls were covered with scrolling text, names, and dates and places. Thrin did not understand what he was seeing until Admiral Chen explained. The names of the dead, Chen said. Every human who died in the first strike, we display them on every ship, every base, every colony. The list takes 11 months to complete. We never stop playing it. Thrin felt a chill run through his ancient bones. Admiral, I come with offers of peace. The Council recognizes humanity's grievance against the Velkari. We can arrange sanctions, reparations, justice under galactic law. Chen was quiet for a moment. He was a thin man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He had been a young officer on the day of the first strike. He had lost his parents, his sisters, his childhood friends, everything except his duty. Reparations, he said finally. You want to talk about reparations? He touched a control, and a holographic image appeared between them. A little girl with dark hair and bright eyes, laughing at something outside the frame. This is Sofia Vasquez. She was 7 years old when the plasma lance hit Buenos Aires. Her mother recovered recordings from the city's emergency systems. I have listened to those recordings, Ambassador. I have heard a 7-year-old girl screaming for her mother while fire consumed her. Thrin could not look away from the image. Tell me, Chen continued, what is the price of that? What reparations balance a child burning alive? Give me a number. I will wait. The ambassador had no answer. The Valkyrie killed 4.2 billion of us. Half our species. They gave us no warning, no chance to surrender, no mercy. They tried to wipe us from existence because they thought we were weak, because they thought no one would stop them. Chen leaned forward, and Thrin saw something in his eyes that made the ancient diplomat want to flee. We did not come for justice, Ambassador. We did not come for reparations. We came to teach the galaxy a lesson that will never be forgotten. When you attempt to exterminate humanity, there is only one possible outcome. And what is that? Thrin whispered. Extinction. The word hung in the air between them. It cannot mean that, Thrin said. The Valkyrie number in the billions. You would kill them all? Every man, woman, and child? They would have killed every human man, woman, and child. They did kill half of them. We are simply returning what they gave us. Nothing more. Nothing less. Thrin stood on trembling legs. He had mediated 1,000 conflicts. He had brought peace to species that had warred for millennia. But looking at Admiral Chen Wei, he knew that no words would change what was coming. This is madness, he said. Chen shook his head slowly. No, Ambassador. This is consequence. The Valkyrie made a choice when they fired on Earth. Now they will live with that choice. Or rather, they will die with it. He gestured toward the door. You may leave now. Tell the Council what you have seen. Tell them what you have heard. And tell them this. Humanity does not seek war with anyone else. We will be good neighbors. We will trade fairly. We will keep our word. But anyone who tries to do to us what the Valkyrie did will share the Valkyrie's fate. Thrin left the human ship in silence. Behind him, the names of the dead continued to scroll across the walls. The hunt was only beginning. 3 years into the war, the Valkyrie Dominion was dying. 200 of their 400 star systems had fallen. Their great fleets, once the terror of the galaxy, had been reduced to scattered groups of survivors running from battle to battle. Billions of Valkyrie were dead. Their colonies burned. Their stations drifted empty in the void. And still the humans came. They came without mercy. They came without pause. Every time the Valkyrie thought they had found safety, human ships would appear on the horizon. Every time they tried to regroup, to rebuild, to catch their breath, the hunters would find them. The Dominion tried everything. They begged other species for help, but no one wanted to stand against humanity. They offered to negotiate, but their messages went unanswered. They set traps and ambushes, but the humans seemed to know every move before it happened. Ambassador Corvith, who had once been the hero of the Dominion, was now its most hated figure. He had started this war. He had chosen to attack Earth. He had promised that humanity would fall easily. And now his people were paying the price for his arrogance. When human forces captured the station where he was hiding, Corveth did not fight. He did not try to escape. He simply stood in the center of his quarters and waited for the end. But the humans did not kill him immediately. Instead, they brought him to a large room where the human admiralty had gathered. Admiral Chen Wei stood at the center, surrounded by officers whose faces showed the weight of everything they had lost and everything they had done. Corveth looked at them, knew that his only hope was to beg. He fell to his knees. His ceremonial robes, once symbols of his power and status, were torn and dirty. The proud crest on his head, which he had worn with such pride, had been cut away in surrender. He was no longer an ambassador or a commander. He was just a broken creature, pleading for his life. Please, he whispered. We were wrong. We understand now. We understand what we did. The humans said nothing. They simply watched. We beg for mercy, Corvith continued. We will give you anything. Our technology, our worlds, our complete surrender. Take everything we have. Enslave us if you must. Make us serve you for 1,000 years. But please, I beg you, let our children live. Admiral Chen looked down at the creature who had ordered the death of half his species. His face showed nothing. No anger, no satisfaction. Just a terrible patience. Beg for your children, a woman's voice said. Corveth looked up and saw Dr. Elena Vasquez stepping forward. She was thin and gray now, worn down by years of work and grief, but her eyes burned with a fire that made Corveth want to look away. That is good, Alina said quietly. That is appropriate. Parents should beg for their children. I know. I would have begged for mine if anyone had given me the chance. She stopped a few feet away from him and looked down with an expression that was almost gentle. Hey. My daughter's name was Sophia. She was 7 years old. She loved butterflies and bad jokes. She was learning to play piano, and she was terrible at it, but she practiced every day because she wanted to make me proud. Corvith could not move. He could not speak. He could only listen. On the morning you killed her, she asked me if the stars had feelings. I told her I did not know. I told her we could talk about it when I came home from my conference. Elena's voice remained calm, but something in the air seemed to grow colder. I never came home. There was no home left. There was no Sophia left. But we recovered recordings from the city's emergency systems. The cameras and microphones that were still running when the plasma lance hit. She paused. I have listened to my daughter's final moments. I have heard her screaming for me while fire consumed everything around her. I have heard her asking why the sky was burning. I have heard her die, Ambassador. Every night for 13 years, I have listened to that recording so that I never forget, so that I never weaken. Corveth was shaking now. Tears streamed down his face. We did not know, he sobbed. We did not understand what we were doing. We thought you were just another primitive species. We thought it would be easy. We did not know you had children who asked about the stars. No, Admiral Chen interrupted. You did not care. There is a difference. He stepped forward to stand beside Alina. You did not care what we were. You did not care what we might become. You saw an easy target, and you attacked. You gave us 93 seconds of warning. 93 seconds for 4 billion people to die. And then you celebrated. You gave yourself medals. You made speeches about your great victory. Chen's voice was ice. Now you kneel before us and beg for mercy. You ask us to spare your children. Tell me, Ambassador, where was your mercy for our children? When Sofia Vasquez burned, where was your mercy? When the infants of Tokyo and the school children of Cairo and the babies of Moscow screamed their last breaths, where was your mercy? Corveth had no answer. There was no answer that could be given. Alina crouched down so that her eyes were level with his. I do not enjoy this, she said softly. I did not want to become what I have become. I was a scientist. I wanted to understand the universe. I wanted to teach my daughter about stars and planets and the wonders of physics. Her voice hardened. But you took that from me. You took everything. And now you will understand what that means. She stood and turned to face the Admiralty. No words were spoken. Each officer simply raised their hand. The vote was unanimous. Chen looked back at Corvath. Sentence stands, he said. The Velkari declared war of extinction against humanity. You will receive war of extinction in return. This is not cruelty. This is not revenge. This is simply consequence. You chose this path when you fired the first shot. Now you will walk it to the end. Corveth screamed as guards dragged him away. His screams echoed through the station for a long time. That night, Lena stood alone at a window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the final campaign was beginning. The last Velkari worlds would fall. A species that had existed for millions of years would cease to exist. She thought about Sophia, about butterflies and bad piano playing and questions about whether stars had feelings. I am sorry, my love, she whispered to the darkness. I am sorry for what I have become, but I will not let them forget. I will never let them forget what they did to you. The war continued, and humanity did not stop. 50 years had passed since the first strike. The world that had once been called Velkar Prime was silent now. Its cities still stood, but no one lived in them. Its museums still held treasures, but no one came to admire them. Its gardens still bloomed, but no one walked among the flowers. Humanity had not destroyed this world. They had done something far more meaningful. They had turned it into a monument. Every building had been preserved exactly as it was when the last Velkari fell. Every archive had been catalogued and protected. Every piece of art, Every book, every recording of music and history and culture had been saved for future generations to study. Visitors came from across the galaxy to walk through the empty streets. Holographic guides explained who the Valkyrie had been, their science, their philosophy, their songs and stories, the toys their children had played with, the dreams they had dreamed, and then the guides explained what they had done to Earth, what they had done to 4.2 billion human beings, what they had done to Sofia Vasquez and countless other children who had asked innocent questions about the universe. The Valkyrie were gone now. Not a single member of their species remained alive. Humanity had offered them a choice: surrender, denounce the actions of the Dominion, accept responsibility for what had been done. Those who did would be allowed to live in peace on reserved worlds, watched but not harmed. But the Valkyrie were a proud species. They had ruled the stars for millions of years. They had conquered 47 worlds before Earth, even facing extinction. Most of them refused to submit to the creatures they had tried to destroy, so they had fought to the last, and humanity had granted them the end they chose. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the base of the central memorial on Velkar Prime. She was 87 years old now, thin and fragile, leaning on a cane. Her hair was white, and her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were still sharp, still burning with the fire that had never gone out. Behind her rose a black obelisk that stretched a full kilometer into the sky. On its surface, 4.2 billion names were carved in letters of light. The names scrolled continuously, as they had for 50 years. As they would for eternity, around her stood representatives from over 300 civilizations. Beings of every shape and size had gathered for this anniversary. Some had traveled for months to be here. All of them knew why this day mattered. Admiral Chen Wei stood beside Alina. He was 93 now, using a powered chair to move around, but his mind was still sharp. He had led humanity through the war and into the peace that followed. He had shaped the new galactic order with careful hands and an iron will. A young journalist from the Celestine Accord approached them. She was barely 50 years old by her species count, practically a child by their standards. But she had been chosen to ask the questions that the galaxy wanted answered. Admiral Chen, Dr. Vasquez. On this 50th anniversary, I have been asked to inquire about your reflections on what has happened. Do you regret the extinction of the Valkyrie? Chen was quiet for a long moment. Behind him, the names of the dead continued to scroll. Regret is not the right word, he said finally. I grieve for what was lost. The Valkyrie had art and music and love, just as we do. They had children who asked questions about the universe. They could have been our friends, our partners in exploring the stars. He paused, but they chose a different path. They chose to see us as prey. They chose to burn our world and murder our children without warning or mercy. They chose extinction for us, and when we survived, they refused to acknowledge what they had done. Lena stepped forward. Her voice was softer now than it had been in her younger years, but it still carried weight. We did not want this, she said. I did not build my weapons because I dreamed of revenge. I built them because I wanted humanity to survive. I wanted to make sure that no one would ever look at our species and see an easy target again. She looked out at the gathered representatives. Hundreds of eyes watched her, waiting. And we succeeded. In the 50 years since the war ended, humanity has spread across the stars. We have built colonies on 1,000 worlds. We have made friends and allies and trading partners among dozens of species. We have shared our technology and our knowledge freely. We have lifted up those who needed help and protected those who could not protect themselves. The journalist nodded slowly. Humanity is known throughout the galaxy as a kind and generous species, yet also as one that should never be threatened. How do you reconcile these two reputations? Chen almost smiled. Almost. They are not in conflict. We are kind because we choose to be kind. We are generous because we have learned the value of friendship. But we are also survivors. We carry the memory of the first strike in our bones. Every human child grows up knowing what happened to Earth, knowing what was done to us, knowing what we did in response, He gestured to the obelisk behind him. This monument exists so that the galaxy never forgets. The Valkyrie are gone, but their lesson remains. Humanity can be the best friend any species has ever known. We will share our food, our medicine, our technology. We will fight beside you against common enemies. We will celebrate your victories and mourn your losses. His voice hardened. But if you try to destroy us, if you murder our children and burn our worlds and give us no choice but war, then understand this: we will not stop. Not for treaties, not for threats, not for begging. We will pursue you across every star and through every shadow until the job is done. This is not a threat. It is simply who we are. Alina nodded slowly. We did not choose to become this. The Valkyrie created us. They looked at a peaceful world full of divided nations and saw weakness. They attacked, and in doing so, they forged us into something new. Something unified. Something that will never be weak again. She looked up at the obelisk, at the endless river of names. My daughter asked me if the stars had feelings. I still do not know the answer, but I know that we have feelings. We remember, we love, we grieve, and when someone tries to take everything from us, we fight back with everything we have. The ceremony ended in silence. Across the galaxy, civilizations watched and listened. Parents explained to their children what had happened to Earth and what had happened after. The story was told in 1,000 languages, on 1,000 worlds, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, other predatory species who had once considered humanity easy prey quietly changed their plans. They looked at the empty monument of Velkar Prime and understood the message that humanity had written there. Some lessons only need to be taught once. Earth had learned the cost of being unprepared. The galaxy had learned the cost of attacking humanity and among the stars. The children of Earth walked forward into a future they had paid for in blood and fire, carrying with them the names of the dead and the promise that they would never be forgotten, never again.